Hello, I'm Craig DeRoche, the president and CEO of Family Policy Alliance. Folks, diversity, equity, and inclusion, those have been a major concern in American colleges. Many of us want to do something about it, but we don't know why. And isn't it funny? Just the words diversity, equity, inclusion, they shouldn't be bad on their own, but together we know that they're being used for a nefarious purpose, not something to benefit diversity, not to benefit equality, inclusion, but to actually work against those things. Dr. Stephen Porter's with us today. He's a professor of higher education at North Carolina State University. He's been on the front lines of this DEI battle after the university targeted him for referring to an academic conference as a, quote, woke joke. On his blog, he filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the university, but ultimately lost the case on appeal to the Supreme Court. But that wasn't the end of the battle, folks. Dr. Porter recently had the opportunity to celebrate the school's decision to ditch the DEI efforts. Dr. Porter recently addressed the change during a Fox News interview, and he joins us today to share more about the latest efforts in this ongoing effort. Dr. Porter, thank you so much for being here on this podcast and talking about this wild story of you taking on DEI all the way to the Supreme Court from North Carolina State University. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So did I get all that right? I got the university right. You did all this, and then unceremoniously or ceremoniously now, you fight this like a first. Let's start with the start.
Sure.
You're a professor at the university. This is bothering you. What's bothering you about DEI? What are the elements of that you don't like?
Well, how much time do we have? I mean, it really boils down to how you describe it, which is the words themselves are fine, but combined, they take on this kind of Orwellian twist where they don't really mean what a normal person would think they mean. My problem, I have no problem with diversity. The issue with the way diversity is practiced with the DEI proponents is a focus on identity politics, where suddenly everyone's individual character and their actions no longer matter. And the only thing that matters is what demographic group we can put them in, and then we rank them based on how oppressed those groups are. And of course, you and I end up at the bottom because we are the evil white males. So that's the issue with diversity. Equity, I think it's clearest why that's a problem. This country was founded on this notion that everyone should have the opportunity to succeed in life. But there's no guarantee, right? You're not guaranteed happiness, just the pursuit of happiness. And so what equity really means is ensuring equality of outcomes. And that means giving preferential treatment to certain groups, again, because of identity politics, given preference to certain demographic groups, and holding other groups behind. And so I think equity is actually probably one of the most pernicious and anti-American parts of DEI. And inclusion simply means our preferred groups need to feel good. And so if you say anything that upsets them in any way, that has to be stamped out. And so this whole notion of inclusion is really, again, it's also anti-American. It's been used to really crush dissent and crack down on free speech. So yeah, I find the whole thing, I'm a little bit different than probably a lot of your audience. I'm pretty socially liberal, but at heart, I'm a patriotic American. I think what makes this country great is the freedoms that we have. And DEI to its core is just very anti-freedom.
And that's why I wanted to have you on, because I'm one of these weird, strange guys who, when I ran and I was in office, Dr. Porter is joining us. He's a professor at North Carolina State University, and he's talking about an experience that he had fighting the authorities, so to speak, out to the Supreme Court and learning about kind of how governments actually work and human beings here. We're talking about equality and inclusion. You talked about equality or equity, DEI, as being anti-American in this inclusion, the way they do it. This is why I wanted to interview you. Mm-hmm. It's very important. People, I think that this is how dumbed down our culture is right now, and why I wanted to have a university professor on here. People think that equality and equity, for some reason, because they start with EQU, they must be similar to each other. But
that's exactly right.
Equity is actually, I would call it an attack. Like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams sat down and they said, hey, this is the breakthrough. God thinks that we all are equal in his sight. He loves us all equally. We got to stop treating some of us as better than the others. That was the breakthrough of the American idea. That's at war with the evil one and every other government in the history of mankind. People don't like that as human beings. So we like to rank each other. That's equity, right? So what you're talking about, I just want our audience to be aware of this, is we're ending this era where people talk about equity as a good thing, people are starting to talk about equity as the opposite of equality in America. And that's kind of what you brought up here, Dr. Porter, right? You
Yes.
actually called them out and said, hey, I'm a college professor. I can't get my brain to be that dumb. Equity is the opposite of equality. I'm going to fight you on it. And then what happened?
Well, it depends on what part of the fight, because there was this huge court battle that I lost, I guess a year or so ago, and then there's the most recent battle that I got them to basically pull back on DEI. So I don't know which one
Well,
you
let's
wanted to
start with
discuss
the
first.
start. How far away were they from recognizing when you pointed this out as a college professor and you're on their staff that they are actually working against the civil rights? Folks, equality is pursued in every one of our founding documents, in our Declaration of Independence, and in all of our constitutional amendments. So understand what people that are pursuing equity are doing is they're trying to undermine the founding of our country and all of our constitutional rules. They're trying to find a way, daylight, like a mouse trying to find a hole to get in your house. That's what they're trying to do. Were they aware at the university and at the courts when you brought it up that they were undermining the tenets of the North Carolina and the American Constitution, or did you have to educate people first?
Well, would argue they still have not been educated. So you have to understand they're all in on this. A big chunk of the faculty, not all of them, and most of the administrators, actually. I think the big problem in this country are really the left-wing administrators more than the faculty, because a lot of the faculty are pretty left. Most faculty are Democrats. I'm very unusual being an open Republican on a college campus. The majority of faculty just really want to be left alone to focus on their research and their teaching. And so it's really the left-wing administrators who hold the power and are really pushing back. But no, I mean, NC State is completely unapologetic. The only way I won this most recent battle is the University System Office, which, in case your viewers don't know, most public university systems in this country have an office and a board of governors that oversees all of the public universities, and they have the ultimate authority, except for the legislature, over the universities. And so we were very lucky in North Carolina that the Republicans have majorities in our General Assembly. And in 23, they passed two very important policies, the Board of Governors, that is, that apply to all universities, public universities in the state. The first was a policy against compelled speech, which was huge, because what that forbid was requiring an employee, a staff member, or a student or an applicant to take a stand on a political or social issue. So that was quite delightful, because all of a sudden Chapel Hill and NC State had to pull all of these mandatory diversity questions that they were asking college applicants on their essays. They were also not allowed to have job applicants draft or respond to basically statements about how they would, for example, contribute to diversity at the university. So that was important. The second one is they replaced an explicit diversity policy with an equality policy. And part of that equality policy was a policy on institutional neutrality. And it stated that public universities, including all of the offices and departments within the university, are forbidden to take a stand on a political or social issue. Now, this is like common sense to me and you. It's like, why is the university taking a political stand on stuff? Why don't they just focus on teaching and research? But, the situation had gotten so crazy that the Board of Governors felt that they had to institute this explicit policy. And so what happened was, a few weeks ago, I filed a complaint. This is after I published this op-ed in the National Review about how the university was evading its obligations to sort of pull back on DEI. And I used that to basically score my win. But the university, did it grudgingly. So for example, when they first instituted this institutional neutrality policy, and let me know, by the way, if I'm talking
Oh, you're
too long.
doing great.
I'm
really,
a college professor, so I like to hear myself talk.
yeah, I'm a recovering politician myself. But no,
Oh God, it's
Dr.
a
Porter,
battle of the mouse.
our audience literally wants to know how thinking adults
Yeah.
come to the point where you kick people out and that's considered inclusive. And that's what you are on the front lines, because you've got a terminal degree, you're a doctorate, you work for one of these smart institutions, and you're literally pulling back the curtain and let us see. So how did you get through to people? We've talked about equity is not equality. Yep. And the way they talk about inclusion, let me just say it this way, Dr. Porter. There was I'm not a smart person like you, but another smart professor, 1948, he said the intolerance paradox. And he said that if a culture tolerates intolerant people, the culture will become intolerant. There's no other way. He was a philosophy professor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you think that through. That's what they're trying to say, is that
Yep.
they're trying to mandate intolerance, in our country
Exactly
too.
right.
And you're pointing that out to them too. Were they aware that, like me walking in, I'm a recovering alcoholic, Dr. Porter, and so when I go to AA meeting, I say, my name's Craig, I'm an alcoholic. And people know that that's part of that culture there. And
Mm-hmm.
that I voluntarily participate in that. If I told you every room you have to go into, you have to announce whether or not you're an alcoholic to make me feel better, that's just a remarkably selfish thing that I'm doing that denies you your identity and your civil rights to live the life you want to live. People don't understand that that's intolerant of me letting you live your life your way. It's not an expansion of tolerance. How did you get through that fight at the university? We're trying to tell people you're not trying to ban books, burn books in the
Right.
parking lot or anything else. You're the one trying to bring tolerance back to NC State. How did that
That's
go?
that's not how it works. That you got to understand that they're all in on this.
Yeah.
Um, the example I would use is when this institutional neutrality policy was passed, the universities were basically told you can't have DEI offices, and so we had an office of I think it was really just called the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, something like that. So we get this email from the chancellor saying, and the chancellor is, like the president, the head of the university, saying, "Oh, we have this new policy, so we're renaming the office, and it became the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity." And then 2 weeks later, get another email. So we're renaming the office again. It's the Office of Equal Opportunity, because clearly someone said, well, you got to get the equity out of there, right? So completely grudgingly trying to obey this new policy. Not a single person was fired. All of these people who'd been hired for the DE office were hired because they're dedicated to DEI. And this is something I pointed out in my op-ed. It's like, it's ludicrous to think these people are suddenly going to say, I love equal opportunity. That equity stuff is terrible, And so clearly they've done this because they want these people to stay with their jobs and continue doing what they're doing. It's all surface level. Same thing with, there's a variety of people across the university in the various colleges that have these titles. And so there's one woman in the College of Engineering, I forget what her title was before, but now I think it was changed now to like Associate Dean for Student Success or something. Hasn't been fired. Sure, she's doing the exact same stuff she did before, but it's all very surface level. And another example would be, I can't remember when this meeting took place. It was a faculty senate meeting that I tuned into on Zoom. I think it might have been 2 months ago. It was when all this stuff was coming down. And our provost actually sat there and said, I'm kind of mystified as to all this local and national opposition to DEI. And I was just sitting there thinking, what kind of a bubble do you live in where you could make a statement like that you don't understand all of the opposition to DEI? But he was just mystified. It's sort of like this person is opposed to breathing oxygen. Why would anyone be opposed to breathing oxygen? It just seems natural to them. So it's the win I scored by, for your viewers. We haven't talked about what I did. So I filed a complaint.
Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to get there. I wanted to do the setup.
Yeah.
So let's get it.
Yeah. So what happened was I got this big success with the National Review op-ed, and I was very excited. And I basically pointed out this thing about the office, and also how they were evading the compelled speech regulations in their job ads, because they were telling job applicants to be sure to read the strategic plan of the university. That's all it said, as well as in the College of Engineering. The College of Engineering, by the way, was doing this. They had something called the Culture Charter, one of the goals of the Culture Charter was to promote DEI. It explicitly said that, and it was telling job candidates, please read, the strategic plan and the Culture Charter. And so it was obvious what they were doing, because at that point then, when a job applicant is interviewed, they can say, well, how will you contribute to the strategic plan of the university, and how will you contribute to the Culture Charter, particularly goal 3 of the Culture Charter, which of course is the DEI. So, and that was the theme of my op-ed, is that DEI is not going away. It's just going underground at our universities. So I got accepted, and it was about a week before it was going to show up. And I was thinking, what can I do here? And because clearly they're violating the system policy against DEI. And I was really irritated about embedding DEI in the strategic plans, because the way universities work is they all have a strategic plan that has a certain number of goals, And in theory, everything the university does is oriented towards achieving the goals of the strategic plan. So having DEI is a bad thing because people within the university can point to that and say, well, we're just, we got to follow the strategic plan. It's been approved by the chancellor. We got to do the DEI. Forget what the system office says. It's in our strategic plan. So I got in this big argument with ChatGPT because I said, how can I sue the university or the system office to enforce this darn policy? And it's like, you can't do it.
I love that.
I sued before and lost, right? So that was my immediate thoughts. Like, how can I sue these people? And so going back and forth, and it kept saying, you got to file a complaint with the board of governors. And finally, I'm like, oh, well, what the heck? Because there's no formal mechanism to do this. So I sat down and kind of wrote up my indictment, and I pointed out 4 things: the strategic plan, and the remedy I asked for is I wanted that stuff gone. The second thing was there was DEI, an extraordinary number of departmental websites promoting DEI. Like the College of Design had a DEI lexicon webpage of all the terminology. And I said, this violates institutional neutrality policy, and I want that gone. I looked at the Transgender Center. This is where I think you and I may differ. I don't really have an issue with trans people, but the pronoun thing drives me insane as a social scientist because I don't think the government should be mandating that I refer to a biological male as a woman or vice versa. I would do it as a common courtesy if someone asks me, but it's very different at a public university if faculty and staff are instructed they must use these preferred pronouns because it's compelled speech. Well, there is a pronoun policy on the Transgender Center saying if you don't use preferred pronouns, it's a violation of the equal opportunity policy of the university. And I'm like, holy crap. I mean, this is the first I've heard of this. This is not good. So I said, I want that gone. And then the fourth one, I admit I was kind of trolling the university a bit. They have a land acknowledgement. Now, do you know what that is? Have you heard of
Oh, land grant. Yeah, you better believe I do. I'm from Michigan Stateville, where Abraham Lincoln started that. So yes, the land, they carry liens on their land that they have to behave a certain way is what you're talking about.
Well, no, that's the land grant. You're right. And we are a land grant. No. This is different. This is a land acknowledgement.
Okay.
Where it says we acknowledge that the university is on certain tribal lands.
Oh, okay.
And therefore we have a special obligation, yada, yada, yada. Now, I think they might have actually gone through and pulled out some of the more DEI language over the past year or so. But it's still there. And I basically wrote and I said, look, this is clearly a political statement. And I think this should be rectified and by listing all previous landowners of the university, including a guy named Pullen, a white landowner, who donated much of the land that started NC State, even though it was a land grant. We had federal land, and then he gave a bunch of land. So that's still up. So I lost on that one, but I got 3 out of 4. And what happened is that shortly, I emailed this in, and through a conservative contact, I got the email address of the chair of the board of governors, and I included the legal counsel and the president. And a couple weeks later, there was a public board meeting, and someone said, you got to go watch this. So the chair of the board opens up by saying, hey, we've got this policy in place, and we expect universities to follow this. And so she was sort of publicly chastising. She didn't call them out by name, but was basically saying to the universities in the state that you better follow this policy. And then suddenly I get this beautiful email from the chancellor saying, we have to completely revise our strategic plan to conform with the institutional neutrality policies. So stay tuned. And so that's gone. There's one whole goal in the entire university-wide strategic plan that dealt with DEI, and that got pulled out. So that's what I was really excited about. The other stuff, the websites and so forth, are less important in terms of how the university is run. But the strategic plan doesn't sound very important to a casual observer, but internally it's an important document. So I was very, very happy about that.
Well, Dr. Porter, I want to tell you that there's a lot of people listening. Our audience right now is made up of a lot of Dr. Porters out there. And I know that you are laughing right now, driving in your car when I say that that's you. You sit there and you laugh at the people like Craig DeRoche or Bunny Pounds or Jim Banks that get the bug. And we say, you know what, I'm going to go fix that. And we end up spending 10, 20, 30 years of our lives in public office. And that's good. Some people get that bite. Some people do in different ways. And we educate them. They serve on school boards and things like that. Guess what? Most of you do what Dr. Porter does, just to less effect. You raise your hand. Something rubs you the wrong way and you take a small action. Maybe it's a micro action internally and nobody even knows about it, or it becomes something that becomes public facing in a smaller way. But we want to highlight these folks because FPA exists and our family policy councils exist for the purpose of the day that you are Dr. Porter, the day that God says, I'm putting this on your heart. Your life experience is meant to step in the gap and stick up for some people that might be in harm's way. We want you to have more confidence that you're not doing that alone. That's what this discussion is about. Not all of them are going to work out well, but we certainly want to celebrate when Dr. Porter, this is what winning looks like, folks, by the way. It's when your opponent is not, he's correct in saying it's grudgingly. It's grudgingly at the leadership level. That's not what's going on at the more administrative level. Everybody else is kind of exhaling. Good. The stupid is leaving North Carolina State University and the North Carolina system. It's a process, just like putting the stupid policies in were a process over years. Getting them out is going to require some work as well. But this is a citizen-led, you're an advocate. You're the hands and feet of Jesus when you do that for people that are in harm's way. And we want to congratulate you for that. So just Dr. Porter, I wanted to orient people why we're celebrating this so much. And it was not the courts that gave Dr. Porter and the other employees of the North Carolina University system and those they serve this relief. It was the leadership of the system that was backed in a corner by effective advocacy by Dr. Porter. So again, I just want to celebrate that, Dr. Porter. But how did that feel to you? Did you see all these people on Fox News normally and CNN where they get no respect and no response? Is that part of why you were on there? You felt like, well, I'm a unique story because I'm one of these weird situations where they might have listened to me even if they didn't want to.
You mean how did I end up on that the Fox News?
Yeah,
story?
like part of your thing is what makes your story different is that you're one of the only people in America that actually got a positive result without a court order to get some change on DEI, right? That's what we're trying to celebrate is the culture is changing in North Carolina slightly, and the courts didn't even make them do it. That's what we're trying to announce here.
Because the system office never got back to me. And so I was sort of in limbo. And then I got this email from the chancellor. It was a university-wide email. So I started poking around the websites, and that's when I saw, oh, the pronoun policy is gone.
Yeah.
DEI lexicon website's gone. And so I put a big blog post up about this, celebrating this about maybe a month ago, and didn't really get any news until recently. I don't know what happened. It just bubbled up. The one thing that happened is I started getting some hate mail from my personal website. You can submit a form.
That's what did it. That's what
that was what it was, and my daughter thought it was hilarious. So I Googled myself to figure out what's going on because something must have happened after I posted this. And there's an NCSU subreddit on Reddit, and someone had posted saying, look at this jerk professor. And so several other people had piled on saying, oh, this is embarrassment that he's here. Because of that, I think it got some attention. But the hilarious thing about this subreddit is that you know, on Reddit you can upvote and downvote comments. And Reddit is almost completely leftist. And so at the very bottom, you can see some conservative students posting. And one of them was like saying, oh, I'd love to take a class from this guy.
By being a guest on this podcast, you're a walking, living example of what we want everybody to do. We want you to raise your hand. We want you to participate where you live. It's worth it. We all have the same size hopes and dreams. And if the adults don't stick up for the least of us, the people that don't have power, nobody will. And that's what you did, Dr. Porter. So take us out from here. What's your hope? I know that the administrators have been very cynical and they've had to be forced to the dance on this. But what's your hope? 5 years from now, do you think it'll be better? Do you have an opportunity to make it better, or do you think it's going to get worse?
I doubt it's going to get worse with Trump in office. I mean, he's pushing hard. I don't know if it's going to get better just because the faculty, first of all, the administrators are entrenched, and the faculty who are really promoting DEI are entrenched. And unfortunately, they're the ones who are the real radicals and are willing to devote the time and effort to push this stuff. Like I said, I think a majority of the faculty really are kind of ambivalent. You know what I'm saying? It's like they really just want to be left alone to do their job.
So you're actually saying that the fix-it will come when the faculty of universities invested in DEI should be held to account individuals.
Yeah.
But we're saying that's what will fix in universities, because generally you're saying university professors never bought into it and they're not going to miss it when it's gone. You got to get rid of more of the activist types.
Yeah, I mean, there's different groups. I would say the big chunk of the faculty, and maybe they never bought into it, or either that or they just don't really care. I mean, it's not important to them. But yeah, I mean, I think you really are going to need change from the top, almost wholesale turnover of a lot of administrators, quite honestly. And then you've got some of these radical departments, which are hotbeds of this stuff. And I'm sure you know what I mean when I say the gender studies, the languages and literature departments.
And what do you
Some of
teach,
these,
Dr. Porter?
well, yeah, I'm in the College of my PhD is in political science, but I'm an educational researcher, and I teach applied statistics and data analysis to the graduate students in the College of Education. So no, yeah, not exactly a gender studies scholar. So yeah, I'm pessimistic about the future of higher ed just because these people are so firmly entrenched and they seem to lack self-awareness. Frederick Hess is this conservative uh, education guy. He just wrote this column. I just posted it, a link to it on my personal website, saying that higher education is like big oil. And the whole point of his column is that higher education has become like these big oil companies who basically have this terrible reputation, right? Especially on the left, they're polluters, doing these horrible things, and which I think is true. We have come to that point. But part of his column as well was that they don't seem to get that they're like big oil, right? They're sort of shocked.
Right.
And that's what
No
I'm saying. They're
self-awareness.
living in this bubble, like the provost of a university. It's like they just don't understand why people are skeptical or dislike them. And so I don't know. I've been very heartened by what President Trump has done. I told the one of the reporters I spoke with, I said, ever since January 20th, I wake up every morning and I jump out of bed to read the news on my tablet to see what lovely new thing has happened. You know, it really has been great. And he's like beaten up in the Ivy Leagues, which I personally greatly enjoy. Um, but you're talking about an entire system, hundreds of thousands of staff and faculty who are all pretty much devoted to DEI and don't see anything wrong with it. And so I think there's almost going to have to be replacement of these people over the long run before we see any change. Either that or the legislatures and the board of governors need to crack down a bit more. And that's happening. Like in Florida, certainly Florida is probably taking the lead in terms of trying to rein in the universities, the public universities. But I don't know. I mean, you've got this group of people who I think tend to be quite arrogant. They don't seem to understand that our salaries are paid by the taxpayer and that ultimate authority for everything we do comes from the state legislature. They just seem to think they're, doing this wonderful thing and there should be no accountability, and how dare anyone question what they do. And there's so many of them. I don't know. I see us sort of like in a holding pattern for the next few years. Trump's going to it's not going to get worse. Um, and certainly it's gotten a little better. Like these two policies I mentioned that the state, that our board of governors passed, it was like a breath of fresh air. I mean, it was like, wow,
Amen.
it just, because it ratcheted down. It basically hems them in a little bit, but they're still there.
They're
And
still
they're like
there.
the provost is there. He's sort of like, I don't see what the problem is, right? And so, yeah, I guess I'm a bit, even though I'm happy with what's happened with my activism, in the long run, I'm a little pessimistic. We'll see what happens. We should talk 5 years from now and see
We'll see what
what's
happens.
happened.
We'll have you back on. We're gonna stay in touch with you, and we want to thank you again, Dr. Porter. You're a hero of ours. We hope that you don't have to answer whether or not you did this, but folks, if you're sitting at home right now, you're driving in your car, you're listening to this podcast, and this makes sense to you when you hear this. 40% of Christians did not vote in the 2024 election. 4 out of 10 of us that go to church every week, 4 out of 10 of us that were talk to our kids about what Easter is, about Jesus, about Christmas. Christians, I'm talking about, do not participate in elections anymore than the leftist communists that run our universities or anything else. Folks, the reason why we lose elections, the reason why we have the people in office we have is because of the turnout, both on the right and the left. We can change that. You can change that if you participate in a higher percentages. Those are numbers that even Dr. Porter would acknowledge. If more Christians vote, more Christian policies will be secure because more Christian aligned people will be serving in office, not Christians in office. It's not a Christian nationalist show there, Dr. Porter, but we want to participate in the country, the school district, the cities. And guess what? Most of our states, we own the university system as well. As a voter, you own it. And so we want you to participate. Please check out the links. Get involved here. If you want to learn more than just voting, you want to actually participate like Dr. Porter did, to have that confidence and do that extraordinary act he did that is going to echo through generations of the families that he affected for the better with his advocacy there, with the policy changes he made. We want you to have your confidence to do that too. Click on the link below. Check out our Learning Management Center, where we have a lot of courses for you to learn about biblical justice, biblical economics, where you would learn to stand up like so many Christians have done throughout time when they see a yellow flag like Dr. Porter did here. Wait, that's somebody else's rights that are being trampled. I need to raise my voice. Thank you, Dr. Porter, for being with us. Thank you for being with us as well and listening to this show. And until next week, we thank God again for being all your support to Family Policy Alliance and Christians Engaged. God bless you all.